What is going on, Justin? Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you. Hey, I want to start out with a big question, and I just want you to just share off the just top of your mind, right from your heart, just the answer. It doesn't have to be perfect or polished. I just would
All
love to
right.
hear how you respond. So, when it comes to being a father who connects with his kids and is on point, what do you think is the most important thing?
Dude, so the biggest thing that I have learned as a dad is patience and supporting them, like being an advocate for them, supporting what they want to do, and then just truly listening. Like so often, I think as a dad, I know for me too, like I always am a very solutions-based guy. So both my daughter, who's older, and my son, like sometimes when they were younger and they'd come to me, like I'd want a solution right away, right? I'm trying to figure out, okay, here's your problem. Let's get to the solution. When sometimes they just want to talk and they just want you to listen. And so just being able to do that and then support them, not give them advice right away, not try to change things right away, but just listen. So they always have that person that they can go to, and they know that that's always an option.
Yeah, man, I love that. Patience is something that is, I think, hard for all of us out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I mean, that's like, I mean, I've been doing this work now for 10 years. And I ask guys when they come and do life with us in our community, I'm like, hey, what brought you here? Like, what's on your
Yeah.
mind? And it's always like, when it comes to being a father, right? Marriage is a little bit different, but father, they're always like, I need to be more patient. So how have you been able to really hone patience in your life?
Dude, so the biggest thing that I always think about is like, what do I want the end result to be? That's kind of like number one, I would say. And then just slowing down, really slowing my brain down and understanding where I'm trying to go. So if my ultimate goal, and I'll kind of take a little offshoot here, like if my ultimate goal is, hey man, I'm going to live till I'm 100 years old, and when I'm 100, I'm going to have my kids right by my bedside, my wife's still going to be there, all these grandkids, great grandkids, and everyone is going to be like, oh man, like this was the rock of our family, right? So if I want that, then I have to establish that now. And if I'm not patient with my kids, if I am very aggravated all the time, if I make them feel like they're a burden when they want something, or if they want to talk, or if they have a problem, if I do those things, then that's not going to get me to my end goal, right? So I really, really try to focus on that. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, man. Like I still struggle with it, but I will really just try to catch myself and say, hey, all right, just listen with them. Let's see what's happening here. What are they doing? And just really think about that. I think that has helped me a ton, just slowing down and being able to listen and letting it kind of work itself out.
So you really visualize, begin with the end in mind. It's not necessarily with the obstacle or the stressor or whatever it is in front of you. You're thinking further out is what you do.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like that's
Yeah.
what I try to do in a lot of different things. Like, hey, what's the desired outcome here? Okay, how do I get there? These are the steps that I need to take over a long period of time to get there. It's not going to be like, hey, man, if you're impatient with your kid, if you're super reactive, if you are always pointing out what they do wrong, like by the time they're 20, they're not even going to come to you, right?
True.
Like the pattern's been established, and that is not a place where I'm going to go to get advice or with questions, because I know I'm going to get critiqued right away. So I know for me, like I really just try to keep that in mind. Like, hey, how do I want my relationship to progress? This is where I want to end up. Okay, these are the things I have to do now to make sure it goes that way.
Have you always been like that, or do you think that this was training from being in the police force for so long and SWAT? And I mean, I would imagine when you are in a situation on the SWAT team, you are thinking, okay, how do I want this situation to play out? Like if I'm at the end of this, like how do I want this to be resolved? Do you think that it's been that type of training, or has this always been the way you've been?
I think probably a little bit of both, man. I would say that definitely has a huge role in it. I think I played some sports in college also, and I think just always being um, process oriented to get to the goal. I think a lot of times we'll talk about a goal, but no one wants to talk about the process to get there. Um, so I think understanding that, like, hey, we're about to go to this barricade or this hostage deal. Like, there's tons of outcomes that are possible. This is the one we want. This is the most ideal. What are the things we need to do and prepare for to try to get there and to make sure that happens? So I definitely translate that into my everyday life, and especially with my kids. And I think part of that is just from always being like process oriented. Like, how do I want things to go to get to the desired result?
When I think about being process oriented, I think of someone thinking very methodical, strategic, and logical, right? And when I see
Yeah.
somebody, or when I lose my patience myself, right, I'm thinking more emotional, right?
Yes.
And it's like that emotional knee jerk reaction. How have you found that you've been able to maybe override that, like, and just always maybe keep that more logical, strategic, and maybe methodical part of your mind at the forefront?
Yeah. So, gosh, dude, like 100% honesty, I've not always been that way, man.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like I've been with my wife since we were 17, and like there's been so many conversations, like especially when we were newly married, or gosh, like yeah, just in the past years where she would just like have to say those things to me, like, hey, like I'm not a guy at work, like don't be so reactive to me, right? Like don't just like go straight to the point, like slow down, think. And I think sometimes for me it is hard to do, right? Because like I'm a very emotional guy also. But to not be emotional with the kids, I think is in a bad way, I guess, is I think once I started doing it more often, like I saw the fruits of the labor too, man. Like you sit down, like your kid, especially with my kids' ages now, 14 and 12, like they'll come to me when I'm out working in the shop, or if I'm doing something on the computer, and they'll come to me and they're super excited to tell me something. And I know like that's an opportunity. Hey, that's an opportunity to get to where I want to go, with our relationship. So I can say, hey, just a minute, come back in like 5 minutes. Hey, just let me finish this. Just give me a second. Or I can stop and pay some attention to them and then make them know, like, hey, if I go to dad with something, like he listens. And I'm not perfect at it, dude. Like it's a very hard thing to do. But I think just kind of thinking those thoughts has helped me a lot. And honestly, dude, just like my faith, like I was not raised a Christian. I was not raised in faith. And I think just like thinking back to that, like, hey man, like how am I supposed to treat people? How does God want me to treat people? How did Jesus treat people? Like that is something I refer to a lot. And in order for me to not be a hypocrite, like I have to live it out. I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to fail pretty often, but I have to try. So those are some of the things I try to keep in mind.
So you weren't raised in your faith.
I was not, man. No,
Uh,
dude.
when
Yeah.
yeah, when so tell me how you found it.
Gosh, dude. So, my dad passed away when I was young, when I was like 10, kind of unexpectedly of a heart attack. And that kind of threw me, definitely like pushed me away. Like I was definitely had all the questions, like there's no God, like God wouldn't do this. Like, how could God take my dad? Like, that's not okay. And I stayed that way for a good amount of time, I would say. But I had some friends that went to church, and like every now and then I would go. There was, I would say, the best way I could describe it, man, there was always like an internal pull, like no matter how much I tried to reject it. And then especially, I got hurt playing football, and that kind of ended my football career in college. So again, that was another like poor me, like how could you do this to me? You know what I want? Like, oh my gosh. And then becoming a cop and all the seeing things you see as a cop, and then on the SWAT team, the things you see definitely pushed me away from that direction. Like there's so much evil, there's so much bad stuff that happens to innocent people. So how could there be a God? And then I just kind of, dude, I would push that down and push it away as much as I could. Like that's the biggest way I could say it. Like I literally would like turn and run. Like I'd get these feelings or these emotions, and I'd be like, nope, nope, cut that off. I got this. I don't need anything else. Like I got this. Like you haven't been there before in these situations. Like no, there's nothing there. But that would just not go away, man. So started going to church, started having some meetings with one of my good buddies that kind of has become a mentor to me in that aspect. And then honestly, my daughter got like super into it. Like our kids started playing the sports at the church. We started attending pretty regularly, and then she had just become like super passionate about it. And then what it'll be. Yeah, it'll be 3 years this August, that we got baptized together. So that was kind of the short story of it.
So when you're newer to your faith, like newer.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
3 years into this thing.
Wow.
So
How does that play a role in, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, like, what does God want me to do? How did Jesus treat people and that kind of thing? I'm curious, as a husband and a father, like every day just sort of interaction with your kids, like what does a day in the life look like for you when it comes to this being at the forefront of how you operate?
yeah, man. So like I read my Bible at some point every day. It's not always the same. But doing that, like talking to my kids about Jesus, about faith at some point, try to every day, like that tries to be some type of conversation. And then just really spend some time thinking about it, man. Like praying over them, talking to them. Um, my wife just got baptized last year. She's just a year ago too. Um, so I think really just trying to dive into like what the word says and revert to that, like just really trying to use that as our guide for life and showing them that, man, like that's coming to faith older. It's something I wish I would have had sooner, especially in like high school, like early 20s times when things seem sometimes pretty rough. Like it would be awesome to have like uh, super dependable, like never going away, the most solid foundation you can ever imagine. So getting them to understand like what that can be for them, um, when we're not around, like, hey, that like God is always there for you. And just trying to really dive into that and put that into them and speak about it in such a way that they can understand and let them process it on their own.
That's really cool, man. Definitely leading from the front. But I love the fact that it sounds like this was really like the catalyst for this whole thing was your daughter, correct?
It was, man. She
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, dude, it was crazy. Like, so we were having conversations. I had talked to my buddy, like we had been meeting for probably like 2 years, maybe every other week or every 3 weeks, we'd get together and chat, and he'd answer my questions. He's actually one of the pastors at our church, um, and he kind of like would hit me like, "Hey, dude, like at some point you gotta just jump, right? Like you don't have to know everything. Like he would say, like I still got questions, man. Like you just gotta do it." And I had always thought that that whole aspect was hard. Like, well, that's why they call it faith. When I was a non-believer, like I thought that was like silly. Like, well, no, dude, like that's just something you say to get people to buy in. And then you get there and you're like, no, this is it. So she had come to me. We were having a conversation. She was interested in getting baptized, and we had kind of talked about it. And we were talking about some things and talking it out. And she's like, Dad, I think you're making it like way more difficult than it needs to be. Like your baptism, like saying yes to Jesus is just the starting point. Like it's not the ending point. And that like hit me. I was like, dude, she's got this figured out at freaking 12, like better than I do at 39, 40. Like this is crazy. And that made so much sense to me, right? Because I think to start out in my faith, like I wanted to like one, have all my questions answered, two, like not have any doubts, and three, like have a clear path of where I was headed, as opposed to just being like, hey man, I'm releasing this to you. Like you got me. Like let's start over.
Wow, man. I mean, it's unexpected though that
Mhm.
our kids, and I say ours because mine was kind of sparked. So about the same. I mean, I've been in my faith for about 4 years now.
Oh, awesome.
I grew up around it, but we didn't really practice very consistently.
Okay.
But my nudge, I think, really started happening when my oldest son and my second born just started asking me questions about faith and what does this mean and what does that mean and what does this scripture mean in the Bible and why do we do this and why do we do that? And I'm like, and I just found I was like, man, I don't know. And then they'd be like, well, why do we do it then? And I'm like, it's because we've always done it. I don't know. And then I was just like, that is a terrible answer. Like I need to like, and plus like there's a big part of me too that like I really wanted a better connection. I wanted a relationship with God. But I didn't know how to get it. Like I didn't understand it. I thought it was very overwhelming. Um but I've been really deep into my faith. I actually just launched a book called The Spirit of Fatherhood.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I just launched it this month actually. And that one was that was probably it's the biggest book I've written, and it was definitely the one that challenged me the most in a
That's
good way.
that's
But
cool,
definitely,
man.
thank
So
you. I'm curious about so you mentioned that you've known your wife. You guys have been together since you guys were 17 years old. You said
yeah.
you've known each other for 26 years,
Dude, so we've been together for 25 years. We've
20
been together,
25.
but we met when we were 13. We met in 7th grade.
Wow. So you don't successfully navigate life for a quarter of a decade with with the woman that you're married to without, I'm sure, some bumps, some bruises, some good times, some great times. But how have you guys sustained like a good relationship over such a long period of time? Like what have you guys consistently done?
Dude, so like the biggest thing that we always talk about is just open communication, man. Open communication, and then our kind of like tagline for each other is like no bad intentions. Like no matter where I'm coming from, like how like brash I can be in my response, if I do something that upsets you, like I have zero bad intentions for you no matter what happens. Like there's never anything done out of malice, right? Like I don't intend to hurt you ever with my words, how I act, things I do. And just being really, really like brutally honest with that. Like I can sometimes be a passive aggressive individual, with like family, friends, like everyone that knows me. Like I can do that, and I'm very kind of I can be quick on those things, and like we'll just call each other out, or she'll call me out. She'll be like, "Hey, like what is your intention with that statement?" And I'm like, my intention was to kind of make you mad, like like that was my intent. Like it was just to like just
Right.
a little jab,
Did
right?
it work? Sounds like it worked.
Yeah, right. And so just getting to the place where like, hey, that bothers me for a second that she does it, but again, like process oriented, goal oriented, man. Like we want to be married for till we're not here anymore. Like
Yeah.
so, in order to do those things, like I'll rather take the little ego hit that she throws at me, or me asking her like something to do with whatever. I'll take those communications and sometimes those short, hard conversations any day of the week over a giant blow up or a separation or any of that.
Yeah, and that's I love the fact that you gave that example, of kind of calling each other out. Or, we say actually in the dad edge community, instead of calling each other out, we call you forward.
I like that.
Because
Yeah,
yeah, it's just
that's
it's
awesome.
it's it's different because calling out, depending on the person that we're saying that statement to, right? They'll like, I'm gonna call you out, right?
Yeah.
It could be like, well, does that mean you're calling me out because you care? Or are you just trying to piss me off? Or are you trying to be disrespectful or what? But calling somebody forward is, I think, a bit different because it's just like, hey, you know what? I want better for you. And I know you want better for you. So therefore, I'm going to respectfully challenge you and call you forward into the person that I know you want to be and I know you can be. Right. But it sounds like you guys do this, call each other forward, but
Yeah.
you guys do this in a very respectful way. How have you guys been able to do this and not just completely blow up in your face?
So it was a process, right? Like when we
Yeah.
first would start doing it, it wasn't always as easy, right? Like it would take some more time to get through things, but um just really like caring about her so much and her caring about me, and we know how much potential each other has and the types of people we are. I think like when you get to that place with the person, like there's no other option. Like, hey, I want my wife to be the best version of herself that I know she can be, that God made her to be. And I know for her to do that, she has got to have my support. And she's got to depend on me to tell her when she's doing good or when she needs to adjust something, or like you said, like call them forward, right? And she's got to do the same thing for me. And at first, like it's not easy, right? Because I know for me, definitely, like I would get defensive about that. Like she would ask something or I'd do something, and she'd be like, "Hey, like, are you trying to pick a fight?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, like I don't like that you're saying that to me." Yes, like I'm upset. Like I want to vent. I want to um, show you that this is messed up, or like show you I am right, as opposed to show us where we need to go, right? I think I would get caught in that sometimes, just as a guy, how my personality is. Like it was more important to me to prove a point and maybe hurt her feelings, or show her she did something wrong, what I would consider wrong at that time, versus it's just a different way. Like, it was more important for me to do that than realize there's different ways and different things, and that's not getting us where we want to go. So I think just having those open conversations, and constantly talking about it. And if that person's going to be that high on your priority list, like, why would you not want it to be that way,
Yeah.
I guess.
I'm so glad you're describing what good communication looks like, because I can't even tell you I mean, how many couples say that, right? Or like if you ask somebody like, well, hey, what's been the secret to your 40-year long marriage, right? And they'd be like,
Yeah.
good communication. And I think that there's always that context that's missing there. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what
Yeah.
does good communication look like? Can you tell me?
Yeah.
And but yeah, you guys, that sounds like that obviously works. That we do the same thing. Jessica and I, we've known each other for 28 years, and we've
That's
been
awesome.
married for 21. And we do that too. We call each other forward, and we have just like we have very, very specific ways of operating. So like, I don't yell at you. You don't yell at me. We don't call each other names, right?
Yeah.
We 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 show each other respect and love and appreciation. And when we do disagree, because it's not if, it's when,
Mhm.
we speak to each other calmly. And when the other person's talking, the other person listens, right? There, you don't cut each other off, right? Just things like that. Very, very simple things. And there are
Yeah.
times where like your emotions will get the best of you, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's always good to be fast to recover, be fast to forgive, be fast to, like this morning. I'll share this with you. So I kind of like went all out for Mother's Day yesterday.
Right on.
I got like this big frame like made for my wife with like all the kids' names on it and stuff like that. And I had like visually like where we could put it in our house. And I got huge balloons, and I made her favorite meal, and we had her mother-in-law over, like we had
Yeah.
steak and shrimp and all this other stuff. And
Awesome.
it was great. It was great. But the thing is I'm not saying that for kudos. I'm saying that because like I want my boys, because I got four of them, to be like, hey, like on special days, man, go all in, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'll tell you, it was a bit surprising for me, but my wife was kind of like, she was like, it was kind of like, yeah, thanks. And that's totally unlike her. I mean, she's not one of those people either. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. She's
Yeah.
not like that at all. She's pretty low key. She's pretty easy. And, but towards the end of the night, she was like, yeah, thanks for Mother's Day. I was like, and I just kind of looked at her. I go, did you, did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. Like, and she just said, yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, she's like, why do you ask? I was like, why? I don't know. I was like, the thing that I had made for you, like, I thought you would like I thought you really like it. I was like, when I told you like where I thought we could put it, you were like, no, not really. And I was like, and you were like, I don't really know where I want to put that. And I was like, I was just kind of like, man, I feel like
Yeah.
maybe like, I don't know. And I guess that kind of sat with her, because I came into my office today to this. And for those of you guys who are just listening, it's a 2-page note from my wife, um, just saying thank you so much for everything. And I feel like I completely dropped the ball on how much I showed my appreciation, because I didn't show you any. And I was like, wow. So like, but it was interesting. I mean, that wasn't even 24 hours ago. And that's like that. Hey, let's recover quick. Let's forgive quick. Like, let's make
Yes.
amends quick, which I think is huge. Cause I think a lot of people like ego, man, we want to hold on to that stuff. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it is, man. Like, and that's one of the big things for us. Like, we do not let problems fester, right? So
Yeah.
if something's bugging one of us, like, we bring it to them if they don't know about it already, and we talk about it and we fix it. Because, dude, like, nothing in life that is bad like gets better if you just let it grow and get worse, right? Like, it creates a divide. There's these little thoughts in your head that are always there that are going to come back up when that person screws up again, like, oh, this is what they did last time, it's the same thing. Whereas if you recover quickly, like you said, or if you fix those problems fast, like, it's for me, it's just like not burned in there as much. It's not a big deal. Like, it just goes out. Whereas before, when we didn't do that, something would be wrong, and it's like, that's what I would do. You would think about it and be like, that's the same thing. It's the same problem that we had last time. It's the same conversation over and over, because you're not fixing the problems, right? You're not communicating well. And I think you said it, and I just wanted to go back to it, was like, good communication is not good in the sense of feeling good. Like good is as in a product of work good, right? So I think a lot of people will think like good communication, oh, happy communication. Like, no, that's not what we're talking about. Like we don't want it to be bad, but good communication is the product being good, the product of your communication being good, not being bad. Like it's moving you forward, it's accomplishing things. That's what good communication is. It's not always going to feel great. Like it might feel awkward. You might not always feel how you want to, or you might not always get the result you want, but communicating well and doing that in a good manner just makes things so much better.
I agree, man. I totally agree. And I love that you said that. I actually wrote that. I typed that in the notes here. Communication doesn't always mean the communication will feel great, right?
Yeah.
And I think people like I know I have too. Like I've gotten that confused in my marriage where it's like, well, I want to have good communication. Well, it doesn't always mean it's gonna feel the best, right?
Yeah.
Solid communication doesn't always go that way. I'm curious with your experience as a law enforcement officer, a SWAT team. You've seen my best friend my whole life. I've known him since high school. He's a detective now. He's been in law enforcement for I think 15 years, and I'm always fascinated. Like we'll get together for lunch. I'm like, tell me the latest story.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm like, tell me something. And but I also empathize with him because I'm like, dude, I was like, you see hell on earth. Like you really see the darkest parts of humanity. I was like, how do you deal with that? Right. And but it's also been fantastic for him as far as his own patience and being able to stay calm and in the heat of chaos. I know we talked about that briefly, but I'm so curious, and for the audience who they really want to work that patience muscle. They want to be calm in the heat of chaos. They want to get through things that are dark in their life. And you've had, I mean, tons of training around that and experience. But what have you found through that training and experience has been the most helpful for you?
Dude, so like practicing, man, like practicing in the small places, right? Like one thing like I always go back to, like if I'm not gonna be patient with my kid for spilling a drink in a restaurant, like I'm definitely not gonna be patient um when we are at work and like things are about to really go down, right? Or if there's like a huge situation going on in my family. Like if I don't practice patience in those small moments, um it's not going to come in the big ones, right? I think that is in life with every skill set trying to develop, and patience is a skill set. It's not just a thing that you either have or don't have. And I think people will use that as a cop out. Like I think I've heard so many dudes I know, I've used it before. Like, dude, I'm just not a patient guy. Well, that's because I'm not trying to be patient. It's because I don't want to be patient right now because that's not serving what I think I want. But really taking advantage of the moments that you can be patient when there's not big consequence, right? Like, hey, it's not going to cost me anything to be a little patient with him when I said, "Hey, like it's time to leave," and he's taking a little longer. Like if I give him another 2 minutes just to see what happens, like is that going to hurt me? Like no, it's actually probably really good for me to develop that patience, and then it's going to make me be able to use that muscle more. Um, and as far as like the law enforcement work, man, yeah, like we have been on so many different things. Like I've been on super long-term surveillances where you're just watching, waiting for something to happen, and you have to react. Um, and just knowing that, like, there's never been a time where I was patient. I shouldn't say never. There's very few times where you're patient in life, and it works against you. I think. Now, obviously, like on the SWAT side of things, like there's definitely times we would have to seize opportunities and do something because there was like an opening. But I think as guys, like just understanding like that patience, that quiet time to sit and think and wait and not be reactive, not react with your emotions right away, and just let them sit for a second, man. Like just let them sit. Um, I think it can pay huge benefits.
Yeah, I agree, man. So it's really what you've done is you've seized small opportunities with low consequences to work that muscle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just get those reps in, right?
mhm. I think that's everything in life, man. Like just to be honest, right?
That's a I never thought of it that way, to be honest. I mean, it's so simple and so obvious, but at the same time, like that's those are great opportunities to work, that patience muscle.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to raising a daughter, right? One of the things that I've been doing the show for almost 10 years. I've got 4 boys,
Okay.
so I wouldn't say I have any firsthand experience raising a girl, right? And one of the things I always try to extract from a man who's trying to raise a strong, young, confident woman is to extract how is it that, especially a teenager, because your daughter's a teenager, correct?
Yeah, she's almost 15.
Almost 15. Oh, so you're right in the heat of it, right?
In
And this is
in in it.
yeah, and so this is where the guys that do life with us in our community, like this is the age where you're at right now, where they're like, man, like I'm trying, right? She thinks I'm annoying, or she doesn't want to talk to me, like she doesn't want to hang out with me. She didn't want to hug me sometimes. This is
Yeah,
like my little girl, and like and I see guys all the time. I don't deal with this firsthand, so I don't know. But for you, like connecting with your daughter, right? That's number one. Uh, but also raising, a strong, confident young woman at the same time, right? How is it you go about things like that?
dude. So connection is huge, right? And it does change, man. Like with the ages change, and they're wanting a little more independence, right? So you're trying to give it to them, but you're also scared because you're like, dude, like you're older now. Decisions have higher consequence.
Do they ever?
So just yeah, right. Just trying to figure that out is
Yeah.
hard. But the honestly with her, like I would say my biggest obstacle with her is my own doing. And it's me being reactive or always wanting to solve a problem, right? Like she will come to me with something, um, and I will go into like dad problem solving mode as opposed to just listen or just be there to care. And it's something I'm definitely like I've been working on and slowly getting better at it. But just letting them connect where they want to connect and meeting them there, not making it what you want it to be, right? So maybe she was your little girl and you guys would sit down, you'd have tea parties, and you could take her to get ice cream, and like maybe that's just not her thing anymore. Maybe she wants to do this thing or do that thing. Like we really connect through our faith, and stuff that we do at church. I think that's huge. Um, and then not putting so much emphasis for me, not putting so much emphasis on things that aren't the biggest emphasis for her. Like we are a big sports family. She's awesome at athlete, great at soccer. Um, but like if you would ask her, she is way more concerned with becoming a youth pastor than she ever is with playing soccer in college. And so for me, like flipping that is really
Wow.
hard. And that's just like a hard thing for me. And I don't know why, but it just is. So trying to connect with her on the things that I know she's really passionate about and not things that I um, want her to be passionate about per se. I think trying to do those things, man, and just always being that person that they can go to no matter what, that will listen, that's not going to shut them out. Even no matter how silly it is or if it's girl drama, right? Like dude, junior high girls are ridiculous. Like she's amazing, but just the drama that goes on and the things that matter and the things that get said now, especially with like social media and everything being on there. Um, like it's easy as a dad to be like, hey, like I don't even want to hear about this nonsense. Like this is silly. Like why are you even worried about this? But to them, it's a big deal,
Right.
right? So I think just being there for those things and for those conversations and listening and being sympathetic and empathetic with them, even if you think it's silly, right? Like it's going to hurt your relationship if they come to you and everything you think is silly and it's dumb, and that's like, why are you worrying about that? That's silly, and just minimize what they're feeling. Like then they're not going to come to you when the big things happen. So that's something I really try to work on and try to do.
I love that, man. It's meeting them where they're at. And, do you know who Chris Voss is?
I do not.
Chris Voss, he was actually Kansas City SWAT, and then he was
Okay.
the chief hostage negotiator for the FBI
Okay.
for a long time. He wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. But he said something that I think is really remarkable, and that is empathy doesn't necessarily mean agreement.
No.
It can, right? But empathy doesn't mean you're empathizing with your daughter
Yeah.
or anybody going through something, and in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't even understand why this is a big deal. But you said it. It's like it's a big deal to them, meeting them where they're at. And it sounds like what you also do is you enter into her world instead of you pulling her into yours, correct?
Yep, that is the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah. Now
That
what about with your son? He's 12,
Yeah,
correct?
he turned 12 in October.
All right. So he is, man, he's like right at that stage of like, being a young man. So like what's most
Oh, yeah.
important and meaningful for you to raise this young man?
Dude, he is, man, like, he's hitting puberty, like, his voice is changing, like, he's growing like a weed, like, it's crazy. Um, I think the most important thing that I think of in regards to him, um, is just preparing him to be a man, right? To prepare him to be a provider, a protector, um, to understand that, hey, dude, like, life is pretty amazing, but there's also hard times, and letting him figure those things out and work through them. I think that's something we really emphasize with both of our kids, is like letting them trying to solve their own problems. Like, we'll be there, like, we're your bumper rails, but we want you to figure this stuff out. Like, make the mistakes when you're in our house. Like, we will give you freedom. We'll let you do a little more things. We'll slowly loosen up the reins while you're under our roof, so that when you are not under our roof anymore, it's not just like everything's going crazy and you've never experienced this before and you have zero idea on how to solve problems. So for him, I think it's really just focusing on that, man, like raising a protector, provider, gentleman.
And I think that's hard to do in this day and age. I
It
actually think
is.
our yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying it is. I think it's super hard, man. Like, I think there's stuff coming at these kids from every different direction, and yeah, it's hard.
It is. And I think you're right. All different directions. I mean, I think it's like an understatement. I was talking about this with another podcast guest last week, and it was on bullying. And I just remember, like, us and our age, like you're in middle school, right? The bullies would go away when you go home. Well,
Yep.
now all you need is a device or something else, and they can get to you like when you're in your own room, right, in your house,
Yeah.
like in some way, shape, or form. But there's a lot coming at these kids like nowadays. There was a book that was actually released, and the author's name is completely abandoning me, but it's all about the generation that we are raising and their anxiety levels
Yeah.
because of just everything that they're are the kids that we're raising, and you and I are raising kids right around the same age. They are literally, it's almost like someone turned on the fire hydrant of just constant flow of information, of videos, of whatever. It's just constant content consumption. If we wanted it, or if they wanted it, they could just by press of a button. But there's a lot of challenges, I think, especially out there for young boys. And as he gets older, what are some things, especially in this age, like right now, right? 12, 13, 14 years old. He's in middle school, correct?
Sixth grade.
Sixth
So out
grade.
here,
So
it's not considered middle school, like seventh
okay.
and eighth is, but yeah, it just depends on where.
So I've heard, and I've heard that middle school, and you said it with girls, right? The drama, but middle school is the hardest 2 years for kids
Yeah,
before they go to college, right? Or if they go to college. And I almost think like I have two in high school right now, and they're great young men. They've got their head on straight. They make good decisions. They're into sports and fitness and all that stuff, and they hang out. And most importantly, they hang out with the right people.
yes,
My I have a 10-year-old, and he'll be starting middle school here in a couple years. And I'm hearing horror stories about middle school and like how much worse it actually is than high school. And I am asking you this from I'm being completely genuine here,
yeah, yeah,
because I feel like even in the handful of years that my kids, my older ones, have been out of middle school, and now that there's like a whole new things I've heard now that's going on in middle schools, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I don't even remember this going on when my older ones were there. So like I'm sitting here thinking like, how do I need to be more diligent and prep my kids for like bullies and kids who into drugs. I mean, like kids are
yeah,
like seventh and eighth graders, dude. They're like vaping and doing weed in the bathrooms.
yep,
What? And we live in a decent neighborhood. It's weird.
yeah.
So, like, what conversations are you having with him about that, if yet?
No, yeah, dude. So we talk about it. We actually after Christmas, dude, he did not go back to like public school, or he did not go back.
Really?
Like he's homeschooling now. And that was kind of a decision from us and him. We had talked about it last summer, but he wanted to go back for sixth grade because they're supposed to do all this fun stuff and have these cool trips. And a lot of that stuff ended up getting canceled because it's not, I don't know, it's not correct anymore, I guess. So after Christmas break, he went back for a week and he's like, I think I want to stay home. And we were like all in. We're like, yes, please do. But we have those conversations, man. And I have them with my daughter also, like, hey, you guys got to understand that decisions you make can have like huge impacts. And like, we're just very open with it, especially her. Like, hey, you can go to a party and there can be a boy there that you think is really cute or that you really like when you're in high school. And he could try to get you to take a pill just because it's cool and everyone's doing it. And if you do that, like, you can die from that. Right. Like, or you can become an addict. Like, there are consequences to decisions. And I think just having that open dialogue and letting them know that that's there, um, and then also, like, something we really try to do as parents is like, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, is build them up in their zone of genius, right? So like, if your kid's not an athlete, like, don't make him play sports. Like, make him stay active. Like, he needs to be healthy, but he doesn't have to be into sports, right? Like, dive into what they're good at and what they really want to do, because then I think that gives them confidence. I think so many kids lack confidence because they're being forced to do things that they have no interest in and that they don't want to do. And we all have to do that at some point, right? Like, you can't say I have no interest in math, like in school. Like, that's not an option, right? But I think some of those other things, where I know I've missed the mark as a dad, was like, hey, trying to push maybe like what I thought they should do, and then they have no interest, and then that makes them not good at something, and then they're performing it and they're not good at it, so then they get made fun of, or then they, like, a slew of problems comes this way, as opposed to really investing in their zone of genius and what they like to do. And then that makes them confident, right? And then we talk about those things like, hey, you have to get, for us, like, hey, you're the person you are comes from Christ, right? Like, that is not, that is who made you. So that is a great basis, the greatest basis to establish confidence. And then understanding hardships, like, they're going to come, especially for young boys, dude. Like, hey, man, you're gonna have situations that you might get picked on, you might get bullied, someone's gonna do this, someone's gonna do that. Like, how do you want to respond? How do you want to stand for yourself? And just really talking those situations out in detail versus just saying like, hey, drugs are bad. Hey, if someone does something bad to a kid, like, stick up for them. Like, have that conversation, but dive into it a little bit and give it some power in their brain, as opposed to a 2 second, 3 second just kind of flyby where it was just another statement from dad.
Hmm. Yeah, man. I hear you. I had I think getting really really detailed in those conversations is key. Like you said, don't be really surface about it. Don't be like, yeah, drugs are bad, or when this happens, do this. Like, give them the real, like, nitty gritty, the real reasons why. That those things are not good. I actually have a cop story for you
All
if you want
right.
to hear it. So, like I said, you know, my kids, just like any other kids, like they done bad things, right? I had one that shoplifted with one of his buddies
Mhm.
about 5 years ago and had no idea. And the store that they shoplifted from was owned by a retired cop.
Oh, geez.
And dude, I've lost my temper with my kids,
Mhm.
but I would say that was probably in the top two.
Yeah.
Like, I got nose to nose, toes to toes in my kid's face. Because plus he just wasn't like that. He was hanging out with a kid who was a super bad influence at the time. And anyway, one thing led to another, and I ended up. I said, "You get in the car." I was like, "We're bringing this back, and not only are we bringing it back, but you're paying this guy for it." And he got caught because the guy had cameras in the store. And the cop said something really fascinating to my son, and he goes, and we watched the video of him do it, and the buddy he was with did it, and then first, and then got in his ear, and you could tell, like, my son was standing there, like, do I do this? Do I
Yeah.
do I not? Whatever, like, and he did. And this retired cop, like we went there and he faced the fire and he said, "Son," he goes, "Let me tell you something." He's like, I was a police officer for 25 years." He goes, "I've seen a lot of bad kids." He goes, "I'm looking at you. You're not a bad kid."
Yeah.
He goes, "That buddy you were hanging out with though, like I don't get a good vibe from him." He goes, "But you need to be really, really cautious about who you hang out with and the choices you make." And he goes, "But you're not a bad kid." And I was like, I didn't expect that to happen, but I took him through this month-long process where there were serious consequences, and he had to, and we actually ended the 1 month of consequences because there's a lot of things that I had him do. And I said, "There's one more thing we're gonna do." He's like, "Okay." And so I drove him to the police station, called ahead, and I said, "Hey, this is what happened. I want to sit down with a police officer and just have this talk with my 11-year-old son." They're like, "Oh yeah, we can do that." And so we sat down and this guy sat down and we told him what happened. And he basically laid out, everything that this guy had seen over the years. And he looked at my son. He goes, "I gotta tell you something, man." He goes, "You're a leader. Like I can tell by the look in your eye and just physically, like people are gonna look at you as a leader." He goes, "But it's your choice if you're gonna step into that."
Yeah.
He goes, "But you have the opportunity to do that." And I will tell you, man, it was from that moment on, that kid, man, he has never even come close to anything like that. In fact, it was a major turning point, going through something like that. But I think sometimes as men, like you're raising these young men, like I think it's really, really important to every now and again bring in other voices that will pour into your kid that aren't you. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with that in the past.
No, man, it's huge. Like I like with the families we know, like and know well, like I try to get my kids to spend time with them, right? Like I have good buddies that I will
Yeah.
try to get my kids to spend time with. Um, just because I think it's so beneficial, man. Like you know it is as a parent, right? Like we can say things to our children and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just dad, sometimes it's just mom. It's what it is. But I think having other especially men that can pour into your son and emphasize the same things that you are, dude. It's so powerful because I know it is for me as an adult, right? Like it's not fun to just be by yourself doing stuff all the time. Like I need other guys to call me forward, right? To push me in a certain direction, to give me a different lens on something that I'm seeing or a problem I'm not dealing with in my business or somewhere else. And sometimes we treat kids like they're different and they're not, man. Like they need that as well. So I think the more you can have those, if you have good relationships with good guys that you trust, like have them hang out with them and their son, like have them do stuff with them, like allow them to do those things and experience what it's like and have other voices in there that it's not just mom and dad. Because there's got to be enough good voices to overpower the bad ones. And if you're not choosing those voices, like they're gonna, right? So I would much rather choose to say who has influence on them and who they can spend time with than them trying to fill it with what they want or what they think they should need at the time.
100% agree, man. 100% agree. Well, listen, as we wrap up here, thank you for sharing everything you did. I mean, you gave us some gold when it comes to getting in these small reps, when it comes to exercising that patience muscle, that calm muscle, being more responsive. I love how you really shared, meeting our daughters where they're at, being empathetic, always being an ear to listen to, also bringing us going into their world and not the other way around. Raising our boys to be protectors and leaders and providers and with integrity. I love that. You're a man who leads with faith. You've talked to us a lot today about good communication, not just good communication, but the detailed, what it means to be a good communicator, and to have good communication in your marriage. And it doesn't always feel great.
Yeah.
And then, the final thing here is, as we wrap up, is I know you're retired from law enforcement. What are you doing these days? I would love for you to share.
Yeah, so now I started making knives when I was on our SWAT team out here in Phoenix, and that business has just been growing and really watching it grow. So MilMak Blades is our company, and it's after like I always get asked, what does MilMak mean? It's the first three letters of each of our kids' names. It's Miller and McKenna, so that's where the MilMak comes from. So doing that stuff, man, it's been such a breath of fresh air, like stepping into a different business and trying to figure out how to run a business versus shoot guns. And yeah, that's where what we're doing, and it's going great, man. It's such a blessing.
Yeah, you guys should really see these knives that Justin makes. They are unbelievable. You can find that at milmakblades.com. But these are high quality, handcrafted. Like these are awesome, man. How long you been doing this for?
Gosh, dude, so I made my first knife in 2011. So what, 13 years now. Been
Wow.
been making blades. So
That's pretty cool. Do you have like one in particular that you're like super like proud of?
dude, so we just released a new model. It's called the Gladius Dagger, and I'm super stoked for it, man. It's a small, like 7-inch overall to make it legal kind of everywhere. Other than the dagger part, some states. But yeah, dude, I'm super pumped for that design. It's been a long time coming. So I'm super excited for that one.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Guys, we'll have a link in the show notes for you as well. So you can number one, connect with Justin. You can see what he's doing over there at MilMak Blades. Head on over to thedadedge.com/481 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/481. Justin, thank you so much for coming on today, man. This was so much fun. You're a good man. And I'll tell you, man, you got like this commanding, calming presence about you. So it's cool. Like you can definitely tell that not only do you talk the talk, but I just get the sense you walk the walk, man. And this was fun.
I appreciate it, Larry. Thank you so much, dude. And
Of
what you're
course.
doing is awesome. Like it's much needed. So thank you.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.